so we'll start here. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 26 again. We made it through verse 26 last time, and which is kind of the beginning of the institution of the Lord's Supper. What I would like to do today is read all of 26 again. All of 26 again. Put us in the mood, and do all of that. If you remember, we're straight off of the apocalypse stuff that kind of came into that, and it was the big thing with the apocalypse stuff is that we often immediately go to thinking like, oh, this is like way in the future, but we got to remember where it is that we're reading. This is right before the cross, right before Jesus is the Last Supper, and all these things. So we got to remember to read it with that context. I think sometimes in our this is something I've been working on for a couple of years. But I think sometimes in our pride, we believe that the story revolves around us, like that we are the earth and the sun is revolving around us, like science. And so like that. I figured you would have the most fun face if I said something like that. And so, but yeah, we
well, he's a pragmatist, not a scientist.
Yeah, exactly. But that's we often want to make the story where it kind of revolves around us, and the truth is that all of this revolves around Jesus, and Jesus, because of his death and resurrection, makes us one with his body. We become the body of Christ.
Do you believe that?
Yeah, the sun revolves around.
Sure.
And so that's integral. And then so we get out of all these things, and we immediately are placed back on the ground, and we see the apocalypse happening, type of thing, where you see Jesus coming to die and rise again. So one of the things we talked about last week, which I had a surprising amount of conversations with people this week that centered around this idea, which makes me think that we were hitting. I enjoyed last week a lot. Like last week was really good, and I learned a ton last week. And the thing I talked to other people about was that through line idea that we kind of come into the beginning of this here, where everyone's like cool with Jesus, and there's this through line where people start kind of picking away. We see it with Judas and all that stuff, where kind of all of a sudden everyone's kind of against Jesus on the cross. Not everyone, but you understand. And so we're seeing this through line as we go through it. So before we read it, did anyone have any comments like what I just said? Nope. All right. Speak now or forever hold your peace. So, all right. So we will read chapter 26.
Now it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, that he said to his disciples,
"You know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified."
Then the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders of the people assembled at the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and plotted to take Jesus by trickery and kill him.
Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people.
And when Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him having an alabaster flask of very costly fragrant oil, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table. But when his disciples saw it, they were indignant.
"Why this waste? For this fragrant oil might have been sold for much and given to the poor."
But when Jesus was aware of it, he said to them,
"Why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, but me you do not have always. For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my burial. Assuredly, I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her.
Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests.
What are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you?
And they counted out to him 30 pieces of silver. So from that time he sought opportunity to betray him. Now on the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus.
Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?
Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.
So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When evening had come, he sat down with the 12. Now, as they were eating, he said,
Assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me.
And they were exceedingly sorrowful. And each of them began to say to him,
Lord, is it I? Lord, is it I?
He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me. The Son of Man indeed goes just as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born.
Then Judas, who was betraying him, answered,
Rabbi, is it I?
You have said it.
And as they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to the disciples.
Take, eat. This is my body.
Then he took the cup and gave thanks, and gave it to them.
Drink from it, all of you. For this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on, until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom.
And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives.
All of you will be made to stumble because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have been raised, I will go before you to Galilee.
Peter answered,
Even if all are made to stumble because of you, I will never be made to stumble.
Assuredly, I say to you that this night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times.
Even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you.
and so said all the disciples. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane.
Sit here while I go and pray over there.
And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed.
My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me.
He went a little farther and fell on his face.
Oh, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will.
Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter,
What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Again, a second time, he went away and prayed.
Oh, my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done.
And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said to them,
Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand.
And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given them a sign.
Whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him.
Immediately he went up to Jesus
Greetings, Rabbi.
and kissed him.
Friend, why have you come?
Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And suddenly, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear.
Put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? How then could the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must happen thus?
In that hour, Jesus said to the multitudes,
Have you come out as against a robber, with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you, teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me. But all this was done, that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled.
Then all the disciples forsook him and fled, and those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, and he went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last 2 false witnesses came forward.
This fellow said, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days.
And the high priest arose and said to him,
Do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you?
But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him,
I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God.
It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven.
Then the high priest tore his clothes.
He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look, now you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think?
He is deserving of death.
Then they spat in his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands.
Prophesy to us, Christ. Who is the one who struck you?
Now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him.
You also were with Jesus of Galilee.
But he denied it before them all.
I do not know what you are saying.
And when he had gone out to the gateway, another girl saw him and said to those who were there.
This fellow also was with Jesus of Nazareth.
But again he denied with an oath.
I do not know the man.
And a little later those who stood by came up and said to Peter,
Surely you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you.
Then he began to curse and swear.
I do not know the man.
And Peter remembered the word of Jesus.
Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times.
So he went out and wept bitterly.
Okay.
Very well done.
Very well done. Very well done. Oh yeah, yeah. 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 This
This is a copy of video?
No. Well, that's the no. This is the best dramatized version of the Bible I have found. And most dramatized versions you can find online for free somewhere. This one you can't really find. So like I think they know it's good. Like that.
This is terrific.
Yeah. So it's the New King James version of the Bible. We have a myriad of different translations. And so if there is something different that you see in yours as we're talking about it and you think it stands out, like mention it. Like that's the whole idea, is that we're not reading Greek in here. And so the different translations help us maybe understand the Greek a little better. Okay, so we kind of made it through verse 25 last week. Is there anything in those 25 verses that we need to reiterate now? Does anyone think we could go back to that at all?
How about when he was anointed? When you read John, it said he was in Simon the leper's house, but it also said Judas was his son. Now,
Judas.
Do you have that in your scripture?
In John?
In John.
You're taking us to John now. We're in Matthew.
I realize that. You know, the other.
You're taking us to John.
And,
all right, well,
you're so supportive.
Let's see.
Okay. Then said one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who should betray him.
Yeah.
Now, if they were in the house of...
So what chapter is that again?
Chapter 12. And that would be...
what verse?
4. 12:4.
So one of his sons was just rejected. Why was this perfume? So I think he's establishing a surname. I don't think it's like Peter's son. Is that what you're doing?
Now, what I'm saying is that was Simon the leper, the father of Judas Iscariot. And if also Lazarus and Mary and Martha were there at that dinner, was Simon the leper maybe the father of those people, or maybe the husband of one of the women?
It could be.
And was Judas really related to them, do you think?
It could be. I don't know.
That kind of stood out to me when I was, reading that after last week.
Yeah. I don't know. So you got that, everything that you read there was in verse 4?
Well, 3 and 4.
3 and 4.
But actually it says Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, is in verse 4.
So I don't have that.
I don't.
It's not in mine.
No. Yeah.
You don't have that in your Bible?
Yeah.
It was later to betray.
Judas.
So is that a King
one
James
of his disciples?
Not funny.
The one who was about to betray
This is a
him.
King James version.
Oh, she's a King James.
Yeah. Gloria's old school with the Bible.
What did they?
Like that. And so, it's so what's probably happening there is that there's a variant. So why would it be in the King James? So all right, we'll detract for just a second. We blame Gloria for all of this.
Sorry. I shouldn't read so many versions.
Yeah. So what the way variants work is the King James is built off of all these other translations getting up to the King James Version. What happened later on is, you think about Indiana Jones, and he was like late 1800s, early 1900s type of time frame. There was just a lot of discovery of antiquities and like things like that. And during that time frame, we found a bunch of old copies that predated the material that was in what they used for the King James. And so when they found out that it was very close, but there was some things that probably weren't in there and they got added in the King James. It seems like that's one of them was Simon's son. So at some point, a scholar, and this all could happen very innocently, where they're writing these things down, and maybe a monk or something like that who's doing, they said, maybe wrote a note that's like, hey, we think this is Simon's son, and then someone else, and then it just becomes part of the translation it's benign. It really doesn't change too much of what our understanding of what's going on and all of those things. Because I think some people are like, they're taking words away from the Bible or something like that. And it's like, it's not about those individual words. It's kind of the idea that's being conveyed. So I think they like, maybe they got it in there because there for a while there was something that's like, oh yeah, this Simon the leper's son is Judas, kind of bringing full circle all around here, which is interesting. I don't know what it gets us beyond that Judas being stingy with the money, at least when it comes to other people, and not for himself. Because like John is like, he would often help himself do it, like that. He would buy extra cookies for himself. like that.
Because Matthew says the disciples were complaining.
Yeah, and so
John, it says
John's name and names. John is name and names. Matthew is leaving it more general, and I kind of think that's the reason why is that thing we were talking about last week with that through line. Like it's one, Matthew I think is wanting us to see ourselves in these people in the sacrifice of Jesus. That I think that's what he's kind of wanting. And as we were reading this again, I was like, gosh, I think that's what he's doing. Is he's trying to see ourselves how we are complicit with all this too. That we would probably complain in a similar way, because I've complained in a similar way. I've worked in churches long enough where I've seen people complain in a similar way. Like that's. I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at George on that one today. Looking at George. like that. And so, so I think that's some of what Matthew, that's the vibe that he's trying to give us in this. And so I think we get down there. The one thing I want to point out again as we're talking about this is verse 22. After Jesus says, like, one of you will betray me, and then they all are like, is it I? Is it I? I think, was that you that was talking about that this week, Vance? I was talking with someone about that through line with the Lord, is it I? And I kind of wonder if that's that through line again, where we find ourselves asking that same question. Just think about, as you're reading it, you're like, oh, is it I? Like that. And is it I? And then then we get into the Judas story and all of that. Did anyone else have anything else from this section that they feel like we need to talk about again?
I think it's Gloria's in the role.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Go ahead.
I'm gonna keep my mouth.
Well, no. We don't want you to keep your mouth shut. That's the last thing we want. That's the last thing we want.
Your go-to at this stage.
Yeah.
Well, I just like the way Matthew uses nameless, faceless people to make his point.
Oh,
A woman is this.
Yeah.
Just a woman, not Mary. A woman.
About some of
He doesn't
mention
and John is doing
earthquakes.
it's completely different.
Yeah.
John is doing
when those other ones.
He's doing it completely different where he's naming names. But Matthew, just as Ed said, and I think that's a good point, is that Matthew, everyone is kind of nameless and faceless, except for Judas down here. But you look at most of these, and then you get into Peter, but a lot of it is there's not many names attached to it. And I think that's intentional. I think it's drawing us into the story, of the crucifixion of our Lord. So all right, I think that's a good point.
I was going to say another point. I think it's just like my name's Carol. There's a lot of Carols out there. Your name is Gloria. There's a lot of Glorias. There were a lot of Judases. There were a lot of Johns.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just said Judas Iscariot.
And you said that's in the King James verse. I won't look at that later.
Yeah.
And
The
he
Judas
kind of
King.
nailed it right down.
It has.
That's why I wondered about it.
It has the King James version, which is in the New King James too. It adds Simon's son to John chapter 12, and so that's yeah. So let's start off with 26 then, and kind of getting into there. What, like the institution of the Lord's Supper, what stood out to you in this? This is something that we celebrate here at Grace every week, and all of that. What stood out to you? Anything stand out to you on this?
When he says, "I will never drink of this fruit of the vine until that day I drink it new with you." So he's saying that's not something physically they're going to do in the next life, but I'm wondering what exactly he means there, or he might mean.
So there's a lot going on here, and we got to spend a little bit of time because we have to remember there's a lot of stuff that we know just because we've been around church a long time, and I think we forget about it a lot. Is we got to remember that this is Passover. And you can't forget what they're talking about here. If you were a first century Jew here in this section, first century Hebrew, all of this would mean something to you because it is integral to your culture of who you are about this meal. And so we got to remember that this meal is when God saved his people. It's after those 10 plagues in Egypt. It was 10, right? Yeah, it was 10. Yeah, it wasn't 12. It was 10.
A lot.
Yeah, 10. Yeah. And so I all of a sudden had no confidence on the number. and so the 10 plagues, in Egypt, and then to save them from the biggest one and the scariest one, the one of death coming through, you have this whole thing with blood on the door frames and all this stuff with it leavened and all these things, and drinking to here has in Passover you commemorate that with those 4 cups, of all that. Yeah, if anything I'm saying is incorrect, correct me in all this. And so you have all this Passover language is being put on to this meal with Jesus and his disciples. And I think the way I understand it is that it's remember the last time God saved the world, it's happening again. And what you got to remember too is at the beginning of Matthew, Matthew's Christmas story is the Magi. The shepherds aren't in Matthew, that's in Luke. Matthew's Christmas story is Matthew, and also the flight to Egypt. Matthew, at least it's my humble opinion, I could be wrong, not, I'm not about it. But that Matthew is strictly calling us back to the Exodus story with his Christmas story. He's calling us back to that. It's like, remember last time God saved his people. And so then we get another call back here in the Passover right before the crucifixion. And he's reminding us about how God saved his people. And I think that cup there is reminds us of, just as we are replaying the story of the Passover with the cups and all the different foods and all of that stuff, like we're replaying it and drinking like almost the cup of wrath and destruction, as we go through there. It's like Jesus is saying all those same things, like, this is the blood of my covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. So I say to you, I will not drink this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it anew with you in the Father's kingdom. And I'm talking a lot. What do you guys think that means? What do you guys think?
Come on, Gloria.
Yeah, Gloria.
Give us some company.
When we talk about drinking again, what's the distinction between I'm going to drink, drink of it all of you. This is the blood of the covenant, and then we will drink it again in the kingdom. Like what's the distinction?
Well, he's saying then that he won't drink again because he knows this is going to be the final until he is crucified.
Mm-hmm.
So then when we come into heaven, and he said he will drink it when we, in heaven, that is the new day, the new beginning.
Okay. So so the way you're looking at it's kind of a celebration idea. Okay.
It's a transition.
Transition, yeah.
It's a transition.
Transition. Mm-hmm. So we're saying in like that one paragraph there, we have like the trend, like to quote Gloria, the transition to like the new kingdom that's coming and all that stuff, which is kind of what we participate in.
Yeah, but it is the new kingdom. He's talking about heaven, or is it the new kingdom here? Mm-hmm. Because of the resurrection, everyone who believes is saved.
Yeah.
So is this the new kingdom?
And is that
why we drink it with him on Sundays?
Yeah, I think that's good. Anyone else have any other thoughts? Like that's
you.
Yeah, you.
That's your
I think we often define kingdom in terms of heaven when we arrive in heaven with God, and I think Jesus makes it clear several other times as well that the kingdom is here, not there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he's saying, is exactly what we were talking about. That we're looking at the kingdom here after the resurrection.
Yeah. And so like that, so which kind of makes communion interesting is, and if you look at so I quoted every Sunday almost where Paul's very upset at how to practicing communion, but if you look between Paul's words when he's talking about communion there, it seems like what they're doing and getting together is kind of a party atmosphere, and so much so that some people are drinking all the communion wine before anyone else gets there. Like that's, I don't think what Paul's complaining about is the thimbles and the wafers that we use today. Like that's, I don't think that's it. I have a feeling it looked much more like a regular Passover, than
for a full.
Yeah.
So some wine, sort of a Baptist covered dish dinner.
Yeah, covered dish dinner. Yeah, exactly. Like Wednesday night, Yeah. And so, but that's, so I think there's a little bit of, it's interesting that both of those things, we're talking about the transition, I think it's a good wording, but it happens like they're all in one paragraph, within two sentences. And that's, and I kind of think that goes back to that old term that we've been using of the now not yet type of idea that yes, we're we're still kind of drinking in the wrath, recognizing the cross in our lives, but also we recognize Jesus' resurrection, looking forward to our own resurrection, like all that stuff at the same time with the same cup as we're all together. I don't know. Does that sound viable? Does that sound good? I don't know. I'm talking about things I haven't talked about much before. What about you, Pam?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Transition part. I mean, as an explanation, yeah.
Yeah.
You could be wrong, but.
Well,
I could.
Yeah.
I can't say like you.
Yeah. So they and then they I love how it says they sung a hymn and went up to the Mount of Olives. Like, wait, that's a weird
line.
Why do you think that line's in there?
Because of the Passover feast, they sing a hymn in the Passover.
Oh, that's good.
In the Seder.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I remember that silly hymn.
For those of you who don't remember, we did Seder meals 2 Lents ago, and so that was we had a good time with that. We had a good time. Yeah, we had a good time with that. Yeah, and so
You do it again?
We might do it again this year. We'll have to see.
I will not host again.
You won't host again. It's a lot of work for the host. It's a lot of work for the host.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
I slept the whole next day.
It's a lot of work for the host, and so they sung him. So, like, if we think about what you said, like they are still participating in that Passover meal, and so then it has them go to the Mount of Olives, and so then we have Jesus saying some odd words, and I'm going to read this real quick. So it's verse 31. And then Jesus said to them, "All of you will be made to stumble because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I've been raised, I will go before you to Galilee." What do you think is being said there? What's that sound like?
Sounds like Isaiah.
What do you mean?
The prophecy.
Okay.
But he's going to be struck.
Oh, okay.
Killed.
Okay. Yeah.
And the people, we all see it in the rest of this chapter where they say, I don't even know him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see that.
And in Luke, where
he's shooting from the hip right now, but I think he's doing good. Let's see, where does the 31
Zechariah.
Zechariah 13, 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Well, like that's a specific one.
Yeah.
Like they would take things out. All right, we'll look up Zechariah. We'll actually do good Bible study.
13 and 7.
Zechariah. There's Zechariah. Okay, so let's see here.
Give me 1 minute.
So it's just Zechariah chapter 13, verse 7. This is where Jesus was quoting that. So, "Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who is my companion, says the Lord of hosts. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. Then I will turn my hand against the little ones." I'll read 8 too. "And it shall come to pass in all the land, says the Lord, that 2/3 of it shall be cut off and die, but 1/3 shall be left in it." So what I think is interesting there is that, Zechariah is definitely talking about this shepherd being struck down, and the sheep don't know, where to go. They're scattered there, and so he's talking about that. And what makes that even more interesting is that the disciples probably would have known that prophecy. Mm-hmm. They would have known that prophecy, and they probably, now I don't know because I didn't really study this beforehand, but they probably would have looked at it as the shepherd was like Israel itself, and that they probably viewed that as the the captivity, like when they were taken from their land and all that. They probably always viewed that, and Jesus is going, look at it through this way. And also, when you connect to it, you see that through line that we've been talking to again, where they start off on Jesus' side, and now they're kind of moving towards that one where they're not on Jesus' side there at the end. And this is kind of being said in this way. And you also see Jesus, and I have this note here, is that Jesus is showing them the solution to all of this. Because remember, they still think that the solution is Jesus ascending to the throne, and kicking Caesar out, and and being this earthly, worldly king type of thing, being the new Messiah, being the new David, and all of that, and Jesus is basically saying it's like, no, that's not how it's going to go down, which I think plays into the arrest here a little bit, and. Yeah, you want to say something?
No, the disciples aren't always the brightest people around, and I think he was trying to go back here to the prophecy to say this has got to be fulfilled. Mm-hmm. This is what's going to happen, because they weren't buying into this idea that he's going to die. That this is, so no, it's got to happen. They're going to strike.
Yeah.
And you guys are going to be scattered. And
then Zechariah goes right into the 1,000-year reign.
Yeah. Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that whole like all the years that God reigns, like that's like that 10 times 10 times 10 type of idea. And because remember, like 10 has the sense of like alls. I mean, you add like 3 alls onto it. And so so in my notes I put solution, that Jesus is offering the solution here. And then you see that Peter refuses the solution. Yeah, like that's, and verse 33, Peter answered and said to him, even if all of these jabronis over here, and that's
translation.
That's what he actually said. He was really into late 90s wrestling. like early 2000s wrestling. When Rock the Dwayne Johnson, when Dwayne the Rock Johnson was really popular, he would call people jabronis, and that's where I get it from. They and so like that's, he's like, all these other people, they're all going to fail you, but I'm never going to. And I did, and look at how the story is written too. I was thinking about that as we were watching this. Peter denies after everyone leaves.
That's right.
Like that's, I was like, oh, look at that. Let's see, where is it? Where does it say that they all leave? I'm not sure right now, but it says that they all fled. Oh, it's verse 56. Verse 56.
Oh.
And it says that
they deserted him.
They all deserted him. Yeah, and then but Peter comes in, and it's interesting that right here we see that same thing. That Peter's like, all these people are going to leave you, but I never will. And that's,
and he did. He's sitting outside in the courtyard. Nice.
Yeah, at a distance, like this. And so like that's, I think that was an interesting tie-in that I see. And then that's also that same tie-in is when Jesus says, I say to you this night before the rooster crows that you'll deny me 3 times. So I want to talk, and Peter's like, even if I have to die, I won't deny you. Like, whatever, Peter. Okay. Like, whatever. I mean, I think that's the point, is that we all take up our own crosses and all this. And I think Vance has a good point here that's connected to this. All of this, verses 31 through 35 here is very much connected to Peter's denial and everyone running away. Very much connected to it. And that's probably why Peter goes away and weeps, because he knows that everything that was just said is how it happened. He just watched it happen right in front of him. And even though he's trying to do everything he could to make it not happen, like here he is, and it just all happens. And so Vance's through line of like making prophecy happen and all of those things, I think this is kind of bolstering that idea. Does that make sense? That it's like Jesus is making all these things, like all this prophecy, even the prophecy of chapter 26, verse 33, or 2 or 4, whatever like that.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, somewhere in that area. We're playing horseshoes here, and that happens at the end too. And so, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense to me. Anything else from that? All right, let's go to the prayer in the garden area. This one is very interesting to me. So what stood out to you? Like, so we're kind of talking about maybe like verse 36 through 46, like that's that kind of area. What stood out to you here?
Disciples are tired.
They're tired.
They were bored to tears. That's what happened.
Yeah, tired. Filled with wine.
Oh, you know what? Maybe they felt because they didn't believe that Jesus really would be resurrected. Like you said, they felt then that Jesus should be the king there. So they felt, okay, you pray, we're going to take a nap.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, maybe.
Just a thought.
Yeah, no, it's good thoughts.
It's just a lot of cups of wine.
It exasperates my frustration with them all through the story, and even at this critical moment, they're unreliable.
Okay. Unreliable?
Yeah, it's they're just unreliable. That they haven't yet achieved what they're going to be doing. And if there's a wrong decision to make, they make it.
So yeah.
Still clueless.
So what did I? My note I have here is connected to like verse 38 and all that, and just that whole like first little paragraph. That my note is I wrote like there's real pain. Feel that pain.
What I get out of this is Jesus' humanity side of it.
Yeah.
Jesus praying that this go away from me if it can. But
so then we have talk of cups again. Mm-hmm. Talk of cups.
Oh yes.
Again.
Yeah.
And I think it's that similar idea. This God pouring out cups of wrath, and idea that it's kind of an Old Testament-y idea. But
the 12 cups of wine that they just drank. But
yeah.
But I think this is when we see his humanity.
Mm-hmm.
He knows what's going to happen. He knows that this is not, as on the human side, not something you want to do.
Yeah.
You want to go through. But he also says, it's your will, not mine.
Mm-hmm.
That's good news.
It is. So, with what you just said, that it's his humanity side, and yet he still is like, well, with God, like God's will over anything else, I choose that. The disciples aren't choosing that. And I think this is really, really juxtaposed here, like where they can't stay awake. And it's like ice and fire. Like they're so different right here. The disciples can't stay awake, and Jesus is worried for his life. Like that's like it's this hot and cold thing right next to each other, and it gets a little mad at him, doesn't it? Like that's he gets a little mad, and I think it's the equivalent of the madness, and I may be wrong on this. But like when someone like throws like ice cold water on you, and you get a little mad at them for doing that to you, like they're so opposite to where Jesus is in this moment. he gets nothing but frustrated. Do you want to have any thoughts?
Well, especially when Jesus had done all the miracles. I mean, can you imagine seeing this and then they couldn't accept it?
Yeah. And him talking about like all the suffering, it's obviously coming, and yet they're just like, yeah.
But we used this term last week, feckless.
Feckless?
You're feckless.
Yeah.
I ask you to do something very simple, and you can't even do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I get angry when I read this. I'm so frustrated.
That's why Jesus got angry.
Yeah.
Even though there wasn't an attorney there.
I don't have an opportunity, do you?
Tax collector, yes. But
yeah. So it's so we see the humanity of Jesus, and I think that is a very important point for me, is that you see this real pain, this because I think one of our things that we struggle with is that we will strip the humanity from Jesus. We'll say, yes, he was a human, but we put him into this like other category, kind of like how we put like Iron Man when we watch a movie or something like that. It's almost like this superhero category. And I think that's something we do. I don't think that's something that Matthew intends for us to see. And so there's all this very real pain, and you see the disciples are just failing. Yeah. Like that's and probably growing up in the Southern Baptist South, I feel like I heard the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak most of the days of my childhood. So like that's so
in your case, I understand.
Yeah. So like that, and so again, Jesus prays. Let's see verse 42. This cup can pass away from me unless I drink it. Your will be done. And so then, why did I write that? So I'm going to read verse 44. Maybe it'll help. 44, 45, 46. So he left them, the disciples, went away again, prayed a third time, came to saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said, "Are you guys still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." And I wrote this last week, but it's like they're awake, but they're still blind. That's like it's they still don't, like they're still asleep. Even though they're awake right now. Like they're still blind. However, all these metaphors we've been using to describe things, this whole gospel, like these guys they're still there. And you see that in the next story. You see that act out, and that's Jesus' arrest and the cutting off of the ear. So, like, what stood out? What stood out to you there?
He didn't put the ear back on.
He didn't put the ear back on?
Yeah, he didn't do it.
Didn't do it in Matthew.
Yeah.
But no. Again, another nameless, faceless person. Someone who was with him cut off the ear.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, is this the one where?
Yeah.
Is it named?
Version is Noah's Peter.
Yeah, the other version says it's Peter. But
Yeah. Like that's a good point though. This nameless person, like somebody, like drew the sword of the ear.
It doesn't even say it was a disciple, just somebody who was with him.
Oh yeah. And that's interesting. Let's go back up to the kiss. So while he was still speaking to them, there's this action of like it's just happening right away, which a great multitude with swords and clubs came, and the chief priests and the elders of the people, and his betrayer, who we know as Judas, had given them a sign saying, whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him. And immediately he went up to Jesus and said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. And Jesus said to him, friend, why have you come? Why it goes to violence after that. And so, like, what's going on there?
This translation doesn't say, why have you come?
Oh, really?
It says, do what you came for. Do what you came to do.
Yeah.
Do what you came to do.
Yep.
Friends.
Interesting.
Friend.
Yeah. Like that's interesting. So that's a good catch. That's a good catch. So that's all right. So that's probably like an oddity of the King James version. So let's see here. So do what you came for.
Do what you're here to do. And they came lay hands on Jesus.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Yeah. So do what you can. And that makes much more sense.
Yes.
much more sense. Okay. So and you have that kiss, and I think that kiss. It's been like a good amount of time on that kiss, and I think it's meant to show how close Judas was. That he's able just to get into Jesus' personal space like that. Yeah, and kind of shows the betrayal all that much more.
Well, he gave Judas a lot of responsibility. He gave him the money to take care of all that time, so he must have respected him enough.
Yeah.
Well, there are stories that he was telling. I like the message. He says, Jesus said, friend, why the charade?
Why the charade?
He said he kissed him. Jesus said, why the charade?
Well, and that fits in with what Jesus says later. He's like, I was preaching the whole time with you guys, and you could come out with me with all these sticks.
Why he calls him a friend? That's why his name.
It's I don't know. Like I think you think about like he comes up to him with a kiss.
Yeah, he still reaches out with friendship.
Yeah, and Jesus maybe is matching that energy.
I love Jesus.
Like that's he's like, yes, friend, do what you come to do, and like that's after just matching his energy. Like that's.
But on the other hand, isn't he, maybe I'm wrong, and I usually am, but it seems to me that he also knows that Judas has to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And at some level, he's acknowledging that Judas is doing this because he has to, that it's God's will that he did this as well. He's got to go through this in order for the salvation to happen. So he's not necessarily blaming Judas for betraying him as much as Judas did what he had to do.
Yeah. I think
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
I think it's
Jesus understood the prophecy. He knew the whole scenario and how it was going to go.
And with us talking about the through line, like we've been talking about where everyone is on Jesus' side and we move to this place where they're not, where everyone abandons him. Like I think Judas is also on that same through line. And what my kind of point on that is, and why I'm liking it, is that it's a lot of times I think we want to overly blame Judas and all this stuff, and he's on that same line with everybody else. He was down here on it.
Earlier, Christ says, guy who does this is going to regret being born.
Sure, yeah.
So in terms of homogenizing this as a friendly gesture, I don't.
Well, I don't think it's a friendly gesture.
Well, calling him friend. If anything, I view it as ironic, sarcastic, disgusted with this guy.
Okay.
Friend.
Yeah.
You're putting me on the cross, friend.
Yeah.
And you're the guy I was talking about back at dinner.
Yeah. So like that's so I think so you're kind of like, you're saying, you're kind of saying, kind of like what I was saying, like he's matching the energy. He's matching the energy of the kiss. Also, if we go back to when Jesus said that, let's see, that was what, here it is. Okay, verse 424. Jesus says that before Judas admits to it. And I think verse 24 is doing dual work there. That through line again, that leaves us at the end of verse 22 with us all saying, "Is it I? Is it I?" You know, and then so then verse 23 and 24, he answered and said, "He who has dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me. The Son of Man indeed goes as is written of him. But woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man who had not been born." We see that Peter does the same thing, and I kind of wonder if that we connect that strongly to Judas, and I think we need to, but I think also it's connected to us as we stare at our sin and indiscretion. I just remembered us talking about that last week.
Yeah, the whole thing is us. The whole thing is us.
Yeah. Like that.
So the disciples all ran away. We're supposed to be disciples. We know that we've run away many times in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I found something a little different here in John chapter 18. It doesn't say anything about Judas kissing Jesus. Jesus was asked, "Who is it you want?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And he said, "I am he." And then it says here on verse 10, then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. And in parentheses, the servant's name is Malchus.
So Matthew doesn't name Malchus, right? That's just a John thing. So again, the person that's getting his ear cut off in Matthew is kind of nameless and faceless too. So like that's, and so what I kind of write is, in my notes, is violence. They're trying, like Jesus talks about the solution, and that was that thing in Zechariah that we looked at. You know, like the shepherd will be struck down and the sheep will be flogged, but don't worry, after I'm raised, I'll go ahead and give you Galilee. Like the crucifixion, like this place of like taking the violence. But they're trying to solve the problem with violence themselves. You know, they're all of a sudden someone comes up and cuts off someone else's ear, and Jesus is like, "What are you doing?" You know, like that's, you know, I've been with you every day, you know? And he says, like verse 52, that Jesus said to him, "Put your sword away, for it is for all who take the sword will perish by the sword." I think he's saying, like, when you are resorting to violence, you will die by that violence. Right? Violence is all you're going to ever get if you go by that way. Or do you think that I cannot now pray for my Father and he will provide with so many more legion of angels to save me? Like, you know, you guys have all this talk about the Messiah and all that stuff, and you think that you got to save it. You know, like we'll talk, like we fall into these same traps today. We're like, oh, we gotta, someone made me feel bad about God. They need to suffer, you know, like that. Like that, I don't like that they made fun of something like that. You know, we need to get all bold and brash and all that stuff. Like no, you'll be fine. Like all this has happened to Jesus already. Why does it need to come down to violence and shame again? I don't know if that makes any sense. But I think we find ourselves. The way this is written, it's so easy to find ourselves in all these things, and we go. And Jesus, you know, in verse 55, Well, verse 54, to quote you guys with the prophecies, how then the scripture of, could the scriptures be fulfilled? Then it must happen thus. Thus is how the King James puts it. And then 55, in that hour, Jesus said to the multitudes, have you come out against me with swords and clubs to take me when I was daily with you and you did nothing? Like that's, I was daily with you. And I think we find ourselves in those same situations where we know the scriptures, we know Jesus, we know that he saves us, and yet oftentimes we act out in our anxiety of trying to protect and trying to, like that. And we all find it's easy to find ourselves in the same story. Yeah, you get angry. It's not hard to find ourselves in here. And it says that after he says this, and the disciples basically say, I've had enough, and they leave. And yet we keep going. Peter's going to leave next, and Jesus dies, rises again to forgive all of these that forsook him. Which is kind of wild. So that's our time. We kind of went over a little bit, but I wanted to make sure we kind of finish that. So Ed Bach, mark in your Bible, verse 57 or whatever it is. You can be keeper of the verses, and so like that. Did anyone have anything they want to say as we close here? Heck of a job. It was. Well, this stuff is we're all reading the rush now. My hair is not crazy. Yeah. I was going to say something. And so, I need a haircut pretty bad. So all right. Well, good deal. Well, to everyone that's watching this on YouTube and all that, thanks for joining us today. All right.